Welcome to the Simple Romantic. Though I may dream about travel to other places and life at another time, I take pleasure in where I am. Almost daily I walk my own neighborhood and local hills. I make music with others in chamber groups and in my own living room. I create my own story and my own unique culture in the here and now. This is episode 2 of Unpolished Performances for the Simple Romantic. As is appropriate for romantics' reflections of times past, this podcast will always be behind the times. That's because each episode reflects themes that emerged from my art journal in the previous month. You can find that art journal online at http://simpleromantic.blogspot.com. That's simpleromantic.blogspot.com. In November of 2010, traveling was on my mind. Isn't it always that way when you don't have enough time to get away from your daily commitments? Luckily for those of us who wander into bygone eras, at the drop of an antique clock or while pausing by the old railroad bridge, time traveling fits into even the tightest schedule. So I've titled Episode 2, Time Out of Time Travel. In part 1 of this cast, I've lined up an interview with a well-known time travel pilot. And in part 2, I'll be reading some of my more popular time-traveling art journal entries from November. They include Time Portal Identification Made Easy, The Dasher or Playing at Past Times, The Assemblage Dawning of the Music, and A Milk Can Remembers. Before I get started, I want to comment on the music that I use in my podcast series. As you may know from reading my online art journal, I'm a big fan of local and simple homebrewed music. In most cases, the music that plays in other tracks behind my voice is music I've played or sung myself. In this introduction, for example, that's me playing McDowell's To a Wild Rose on my living room piano. In other cases, I refer to a music classmate or a friend playing, and I ask permission of my classmates before I use their music. Likewise, the illustrations I showcase in my online journal are all my own creations. Most of them are collages and altered photos that I take myself. Occasionally, I use one of my husband's photos as the basis for a creation. I don't riff other people's work. In a couple of cases, I've used free downloads for backgrounds, like the vintage luggage tag that I used for the gift tags and bookmarks that I occasionally put out. I put them out as free printable downloads. There was also a box template I used for the small free download gift box I used in Even a Stopped Clock Tells the Right Time Twice a Day. And I made sure to credit the sites from which I got these downloads. In the case of the box, I emailed the woman and asked her permission to use her box template as the basis for my box. Even we fledgling podcasters know that it's important to feature interviews with well-known contributors to our special niches. This month, I was lucky enough to score a live interview with Period Pilot's senior staff member BidingMyTime, known to her legion of fans as Captain BidingMyTime. I met the good captain last month when she was helping me to improve my time portal identification skills. In this interview, the captain was gracious enough to share a little about her early life as a period pilot. With no further ado, let's meet Captain BidingMyTime. Welcome to the Simple Romantics Unpolished Performances, Captain. I know you're in big demand with all the podcasters, and I really appreciate a woman of your standing taking time out of her busy schedule for us. Well, hon, I put my pants on one leg at a time, just like the next woman. I can always spare a little time for the hoi polloi, and your email just happened to be at the top of the list when I finished my last flight. Gee, I guess I was in the right place at the right time then. Captain BidingMyTime, can you tell us something about how you got started in the business? Well, you might not think it to look at my uniform, the way I fill it out now. But once upon a time, I was just a scrawny, raw-boned gal living on a ranch out in southeastern Arizona in Cochise County. That was back in the 19th century, of course. Just recent times, really, when you're in my line of work. My parents, they got along pretty well with everybody around there, 'cause my mama was one of the Ndi. You probably heard them referred to thee as Apache. My daddy was a retired cavalry officer who came west after the war. So your mother was a Chiricahua? Did you spend much time with her family? You see, hon, that's how I got involved in the business at such a young age. About 16 I was when I went to help out one of my aunties one summer. She was my mother's oldest sister. I was always a little bit of a rebel at home. Capable girls with ideas of their own weren't real popular in white settlements in those times. But strong-minded women were nothing new to the Tiandi. And that's when I started off my career. So you learned about time travel with the Apache, the Ndi? Or you could say Chindi or Nini, just means people. Yeah, my auntie and one of my mama's older sisters were shamans. When they were my age, they'd spent a summer with Lozen, who taught them. Lozen was a real sharp tack and a shaman herself. Oh, wasn't her brother Victorio, and didn't they? Yeah, they fought alongside Geronimo. Geronimo surrendered about the time I was 10. So your aunties taught you how to pilot through time? Oh, it was just the one who had that skill herself. She got me started, but she didn't do a lot of travel herself because she didn't like to leave her kids behind and they didn't want to leave home. Most of the women in my mama's family own a variety of powers, but it's pretty rare to be able to pilot a group through time. Turned out I had that, though. I learned from my aunties that when you got it, you owe it to your tribe to share that skill and use it for the common good. So how did you help out? It was kind of a rough time for your mother's people, wasn't it? Hadn't they been forced to move onto the reservations by then? It was hard times, all right. I did take some of the family back a few centuries. Back to the 1300s, in fact. A few of them are still back there, and we meet up occasionally for a holiday trip. But most of them chose to stay on. A lot of people are like that about living in one time and place. Time travel's not for everybody. We like to stick with our modern or our old-fashioned points of view. I suppose that's true. I have a real hard time just having to cover my hair with a scarf or cap when I go back a century or so, and even that Victorian net with all the hairpins really irritates me, not to mention the lack of sanitary conveniences. Huh. And I bet you ain't too crazy about the way that the menfolk treat you either. Yes, though I've been surprised more than once to find that some of my attitudes about, male-female relationships in times past are kind of stereotyped. I think people that really loved each other viewed each other as equals, no matter what the time and place. Yeah, a lot of the fellas are actually pretty respectful of a woman's having her own ideas. Well, you just read any of those Diana Gabaldon books like Dragonfly and Amber or Outlander. There's a girl that knows how to time travel. Oh, yes. My favorite is the one where she went back to the 18th century and met up with Jamie again after returning to modern times for 20 years to have their daughter. Sure. That's the one she called Voyager, right? I read it on a layover in the Negev when I took some folks from Manhattan back to 922 BCE. There was supposed to be a big family wedding nearby, but it turned out we went back a season too early. We got stuck out in the desert in a sandstorm on the way into Jerusalem. Oh, was it worth the wait? Hon, I could spend another hour telling you about that. Those people really knew how to put on a party. Well, We were talking a minute ago about Diana Gabaldon's books. In her stories, Claire always travels back through standing stones, though I think Gelly Duncan was checking out that cave in the West Indies as a portal. Oh, don't even think about trying out one of those caves. So, I guess Period Pilot doesn't use caves? Oh, sure, there's safe cave portals, but that kind is real bad juju. You develop an eye for telling them apart when you've been doing this as long as I have. Captain, we've talked before about identifying time portals, but when I went out and searched Wikipedia, I didn't find anything about portals, only time machines. Oh, sure, you gonna count an engine to take you through the ether? You can't believe everything you read on the web, hon. Don't even get me started on some of the other things that you hear the novices talking about. So you're not a fan of the methods that include fainting or dreaming or jumping into a chasm? I know people that go that way, though you sure gotta watch out when you try that jumping one. But I guess I'm just too much of a down-to-earth gal. Besides which, those make it real hard to take a bunch of passengers along for the ride. Well, are there any other techniques that people use that you do think worth pursuing? Oh, playing an instrument or singing something from another area is pretty reliable if you like to travel solo. Matter of fact, I went to a local symphony concert a couple weeks back. I got so caught up in the handle, I ended up in London in 1750. And you know, hon, I just don't have the figure for those hooped skirts. I'd left my cell phone at home, so I was stuck there for 3 days. Finally, I found just the right kind of old twisty staircase in a back alley off Half Moon Street. I never had to eat so much meat in my life. Couldn't find a vegetable or a piece of fruit. One of my colleagues said they got him there somewhere. I sure couldn't find him. Well, so do you... Oh, sorry, hon. That's work calling. Just a sec. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, I'll be right there. Sorry, hon. Looks like I gotta cut this short. They need me to fill in. One of the girls is down with dengue fever. Sheesh. Told her to use the heavy-duty bug repellent when she took that genealogy group back to colonial Jamaica. Thanks again, Captain. I had the time of my life talking to you. Well, I've never seen anyone hop a carriage clock as fast as that woman. She is certainly a timely ball of fire. And mighty well preserved for her age, too. I sure hope I'm that vigorous when I get to be 136. We'll meet up with Captain BidingMyTime again in part 2 of this cast.